therootwave.com.
What's going on, beautiful people? Thank you for returning back to the Perspective series on therootwave.com. Today I have Michel, Antoine. Please say hello to the audience. Let us know where we can find you, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Esteban, for having me. You can find me on IG at ShellyJelly89. That's CHELIJELLY89. I also have a professional page, Michel Therapy, MICHEL Therapy.
Thank you so much for being on the channel. I really appreciate it. I have you on the channel for a couple of reasons. One, I would love to discuss your art, your passion, your books, how you're dancing, your Zumba. I have you on the show because I love how you are comfortable expressing yourself. I think it's a lot of what we need now, and I think it's happening, right, based on like social media and all this other stuff. Like, we're learning to express ourselves. The other reason I want you on this channel today is because I'm hoping to speak to you about your profession also. About what have you experienced, maybe some helpful tips for us. I know you do a whole bunch of stuff that I support as well, and I just wanted to get a little insight on that. So if you wouldn't mind, let's start with the profession, that portion, and then we'll go on to everything else, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Please.
sure. Yeah, so I am a bilingual licensed mental health counselor. I have my own private practice that I work in part-time. I also work for a group clinical practice out of the Bronx. So I have been in my own private practice for the past 3 years. I work with mainly adults and adolescents. However, I have worked with children and families as well. I provide individual, couples, and family therapy. I predominantly focus on anxiety and a history of trauma. Outside of that, I also provide monthly women empowerment workshops. I hold them every third Saturday of the month, different topics. So I've done, improving self-esteem. I've done setting boundaries, correcting irrational thoughts. So every month I change it up, and it's about 3 to 8 women that come together. It's kind of like a therapy support group that I provide. I've also done some mental health presentations as well. I'm actually trying to get a bit more into that, just something kind of more community-based. So I've done presentations on just mental health and masculinity, femininity, and the way that media kind of influences mental health. And on top of that, again, part-time, I also work for a group clinical practice in the Bronx, where I do pretty much the same thing, where it is kind of individual therapy.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, you see, now you know I have in the channel. Yeah, you're busy. I'm very big into, I know this is going to get me in trouble, but I don't like using the word mental health because I think it's a little bit of everything, right? It's like, it's a correlation of mental health, community health, personal health, family health. So I feel like it encompasses a lot. It's not just one thing. And I think that's where we pigeonhole ourselves sometimes, where we're thinking it's in my mind, oh my God. And then we don't realize that a lot of times if we just improve our surroundings, do other things, and then maybe we can internally also start feeling better and with more ease of change or progression, I feel like. So this is why I have you on the channel, and I want to ask you, what have you encountered in regards to the topics that you mentioned, anxiety and just trauma and all that stuff? What have you learned or come across so far in your career that you can tell us? It doesn't have to be anything specific in the sense of somebody's story, but it can be like, where do you see that people get stuck mostly? And then how have you helped them, or what advice have you given them to get them unstuck?
Yeah, sure. I would say one of the biggest things that I get often is that many people have not been in therapy. So I make it a point when people do reach out to me, whether it's to work with me directly or to just find a therapist for themselves, the process that it typically should be, where it should be, very welcoming environment. It should be, I think a lot of times people don't realize the rights that they have where they can figure out which therapist is going to be best for them. And they're not stuck necessarily if they have one session and feel like it's not the right match. We're humans, right? So it's like different personalities. Some personalities just don't click, and that's okay. But a lot of times I think people kind of feel stuck in that sense. So I feel like that's one of the biggest things of kind of explaining this is what we do in the first session. It typically is an intake session, asking several questions, but we do that in order to figure out, okay, what skills, what processes we're going to use to kind of move forward and kind of working on the goals that you have.
When somebody actually comes in and starts having therapy, and it comes, let's talk about the anxiety.
Yeah,
Where do you feel there's a common line when it comes to anxiety and the people you work with? Like,
yeah,
where do you see that they have a common draw, and something that maybe if we talk about it right now, somebody's gonna say, "Hey, I have that too," and then maybe you can give us a
right,
little
right,
bit of
right.
insight on that.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think that anxiety comes from a lot of different factors. There are biological studies about anxiety, I should say genetic factors with anxiety. And then there's a lot of it that has to do with, as you mentioned before, like our environment, right? And really what we witness as well, where, if you had, parents, older siblings, caregivers that also had anxiety, but they were managing it in ways that weren't healthy, typically we follow that. And children are impressionable, right? So we're typically just kind of doing what we saw. So I would say it comes from, again, like a lot of different factors. And, I think a big thing is that people, and this also comes with trauma as well. And I know you asked about that before too. I think with both anxiety and trauma, that there really is a big sense of, okay, this is my fault. Um, and this is something, they don't always think about, okay, let me change my environment, let me recognize that asking for help is actually stronger. And I try to redirect thoughts in that way, or reframe thoughts in that way, where a lot of people think, okay, asking for help is like a weakness, when in reality a lot of people don't want to ask for help, right? And it takes, I think, extra strength to say, hey, I do need help, and that's okay, right? um, so with trauma, I'm just kind of jumping to trauma now, but I feel like in a lot of ways, what I do end up explaining is that, again, it's not their fault, but because when we think about trauma, typically the clients that I work with have childhood trauma or trauma that happened in their childhood or adolescence. So it really is kind of this recognition too that our brains are still developing. Our brains are wiring in a particular way. So when we're experiencing something, our brain is going to adapt to that particular environment, right? So a lot of it as adults, when we reflect back to it, we can recognize, wait a second, even though that felt normal, we still have our feelings about it. We still felt scared or we still felt anxious in that situation. So a lot of the work that I do is recreating a space where we can actually talk about it and challenge those thoughts, those irrational thoughts about this is my fault in terms of, the abuse that I experienced or whatever the case may be, right? So really is kind of correcting that and doing it in a safe space so that they can understand that it isn't something that's their fault.
In your experience, do you feel that trauma is mostly seen in the younger years, right? Like that's where that kind of molds us for the rest of our lives, right? So like if we're experiencing trauma before the age of, like, let's say 18, it does affect us, right? What are there's different categories of trauma when you speak to these patients, or is it, how do you guys in your profession like qualify that?
Um, I would definitely say there are different levels of it, but at the same time, we what we don't want to do at any point is kind of like compare in a way, I guess, and say like your trauma is worse or this trauma is not as bad. So it really is just very unique to the client. Someone could experience, years of something, and someone could experience something that happened just once, but typically we're focusing on just kind of the symptoms that are being presented. And again, it's like this understanding, this is not your fault. How do we understand this in a different way? And then we go into, of course, like a bunch of coping skills and things that we can do to really process it and understand it differently.
So would it be fair to say what you're saying is that in the profession, let's say, is trauma categorized like in a general sense? Is it, or is it classified sometimes into little subgroups?
I feel like that can depend. For some, it's focusing on one specific, whether it's like a relationship or whether one specific incident. For others, it can be focusing on several things, right? I do find that those who might have experienced multiple traumas, that it can be more helpful, I think, for them to focus on one thing at a time rather than kind of thinking about everything happening at the same time, right? But more so kind of this focus of like, let's focus on the coping skills. Let's focus on, again, one thing at a time, just so it's not, daunting or overwhelming in the therapy office.
What my God, I just lost the question in my head. I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I went through a good amount of trauma as a child. What level that is, like everyone's different, right? But
Yeah.
it was significant enough to be a huge factor in my life. It took me a long time of years of depression, anxiety, medicine. I couldn't get it figured out. I was just like, you know what, I just can't. I think I was like 25 or 28, something like that, where I was like, I just don't know how I'm going to live the rest of my life like this. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What ended up helping me, and I'm going to tell you what helped me so that way I can get your professional opinion on that side, right? Because I like to play devil's advocate, because not everything works for everyone. And like I said, therapy is great for me, was great for me, and is still great for me for some sense. But what really like knocked it out the park for me was professional hypnotherapy. That really took me to, literally in 1 to 3 sessions, took me from just one place that I was at for over 2 decades to a place I've never been before, which you actually are seeing the product of that environment now, of that process now, right? Since then, I've studied meditation, hypnotherapy, and I hope to become a hypnotherapist one day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big goal of mine.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's like a hidden secret, but yeah, that's what I want to do. I refer a lot of people to my hypnotherapist, and they've had success. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to, let's say, your profession and then someone like a hypnotherapist profession, and maybe can give us a little insight from your side on that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to lie. I don't have much experience or knowledge about hypnotherapy. We did in graduate school. You have to go over just kind of different approaches, but I don't recall that wasn't one that we. There wasn't a separate class for it. It just kind of was, okay, this is what this is. Let's move on. So I can't really speak too much about that. I do remember learning about just kind of the effect of that it can be very powerful for some people, right? And a lot of it I remember was based on how people view it. So knowing that, and that's similar, I think, to any kind of therapy, where if you feel like you're going to get something out of that, typically you will, right? It's kind of like what you're putting into it is what you're going to get out of it. For again, specifically hypnotherapy, I don't know too much about, but I have done. I know you mentioned like meditations. I facilitate many meditations, and for some clients, it'll just be mainly a meditation for the session, and they find that super helpful. So I definitely can resonate with it. I just haven't done that specifically.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's probably why I'm
Yeah.
so interested in it, because I feel like it's still in baby stages of exposure to the world and how it helps people. But I wanted to bring it up just to see if there was something to be said about it, because a lot of the interviews that I talk about mental health and all that stuff, I really go into this hypnotherapy thing because it just helped me like leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. When it comes to, let's talk real quick before we move on to your creative
Yeah.
process. But when it comes to family trauma or family toxicity or any of that stuff, any words of advice or anything that you can speak on that, please?
Yeah, definitely. I think what I encounter a lot of the times is that there is a lot of family toxicity, and people, and I always say it's whether it's society, whether it's like cultural expectations, whether it's just familial views, that there's kind of this expectation of, okay, this is my mother, so, you know, I should be close, or this is my father, so I should be close. And we're often seeing things, you know, in the media or just shows, books of just kind of these close relationships with not many problems, or the problem just goes away by the end of the movie, right? Which is not realistic. So a lot of times what I recommend is to really think about what people are ingesting, you know, the same that we were talking about in terms of environment, in terms of, you know, what are you watching? What are you listening to? Who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with? And really just assessing your own energy with that, and really recognizing, am I feeling better? Am I feeling motivated? Am I feeling influenced versus am I feeling drained? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I feeling really shitty about myself? You know, so it's kind of just thinking, I think, about just kind of the energy that you're feeling, and recognizing it is okay to set boundaries with people in your family if you need to, and if it benefits just your mental health.
That makes sense. It does.
Yeah.
So after I took care of all my traumas and mental health and got it into a place where anytime it comes up, I can handle it, I felt a need of going back to being creative myself, and also understanding what self fulfillment was, which that was a slap in the face learning that at almost 30. But you know, now it's been like a journey of, wow, it's so important, it's so great, like expressing myself, doing things that I love and enjoy, you know, just really working on me internally, externally, all that good stuff.
Right.
You've also do a lot of work expressing yourself. Would you
Yeah.
mind correlating these two subjects in regards to self fulfillment expression, and then do you mind going into your forms of expression, please?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so related. I'm definitely working on that too, just my own integration, because I feel like, again, there's different things that I do. And sometimes I try my best to kind of separate them for certain reasons. Sometimes I do just want something more personal for myself, and I want to kind of separate the professionalism. But then I realize that, you know, as I venture more into that creative side of me, it is like something that really helps with my integration. But I think, you know, mental health wise, that expressing yourself creatively is just a great coping skill. I recommend this to most of my clients, whether it's journaling, whether it is movement, dancing, yoga, doing something to just express themselves, just so that they can, um, you know, whether it is like trauma, whether it is anxiety, whether it is depression, that it's a great way to really process your feelings and process your thoughts. And sometimes we don't have, you know, going back to like family toxicity, sometimes we don't necessarily have the environment to do so. So I think it's especially important to do that.
Yeah,
And
go
I
ahead.
guess sorry, I was trying to think about the next
It's
thing
okay.
that you.
Well, let's get into, like, you know, your writing, your poetry. Let's get into your dancing, and then also let's talk a little bit about your books.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I started writing, mainly journaling at about 7 or 8 years old. And I just found that it was easier for me to express myself that way. I've always had like a trouble time, I guess, articulating my thoughts and expressing them like at that moment. So I feel that it was a great way for me to kind of get my words out, to get my thoughts and my feelings out in a safe way, right? Because you think about it, a journal is not going to judge you, you know, it validates you in any way that you need to, right? So I feel like that was something that was really helpful for me. Continued doing that. I continued journaling since then, since about 7 or 8. And then regarding poetry, I would say that I started writing poetry in about high school. That was my first relationship, and I guess just emotionally, I needed a way to express myself, um, you know, with the emotions that were going on for me. And actually performing them, I didn't start performing until I got to graduate school. So that was a big change. I remember the first performance, I was up there for a good minute. It felt like an hour, but I was so nervous. But then after I did it, people were sharing, you should join the slam team. They really resonate with my words. So it really encouraged me to keep going with that.
Right, it built your confidence, right? And it was
Yeah,
like you did
definitely.
it, you were scared the whole time to do it, and then it was like so worth it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Tell me a little bit about your books, please.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm gonna show them off too.
Sure.
So this is my self-published book, Stop, Love, and Listen. It's a collection of poems and journal entries. I do, for those watching, I do sell it on Amazon for $20. Like I said, poems and journal entries, they're divided into different chapters. And Stop, Love, and Listen was written predominantly in 2018, the beginning of 2018. I self-published it in December of 2018, but I was going through a lot of transitions, just job-wise, relationship-wise, and I felt like I was kind of rushing into things, or not okay with not being okay of not knowing the next step per se. So I really had to grapple, I guess, with those losses. And a lot of the poems and journal entries reflect that. So when I say, stop, I actually mean stop and take your time with things, right? And you don't need to rush. Love, I talk about self-love and learning to love yourself, which is what I had to do at that time as well. And listen, also referring to self in terms of like listening to your intuition, listening to people that really do care about you. I have two more. I was also featured in an anthology. This is United Volume Red by Beautiful Minds Unite. I highly recommend this also for anyone watching. A lot of different poets and authors here, but it's probably one of my favorite books. Just the artistry is beautiful, and it's not describable, so you should just get it. I was also featured in this. So this is Dear Sister Friend created by Cheyenne Tyler Jacobs. So this is, I would say this book is probably the most empowering book I've read for a woman. So just being a woman, it was so empowering, so enlightening. So I would definitely recommend this too. So I have two poems in each of those, and then this is again the poem that I self-published. So this is all my work.
Awesome. You've done a
Yeah.
lot. Where do you see your self-expression going? Let's say in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Where do you see your career going in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and where do you see any art or any of that going in 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah. Um, those are great questions. I would say with my art, I do want to write another book. I feel like I learned a lot in the process of writing this first book, and I definitely, just like the book's message, I would definitely want to take my time with it, and really, get, I think, more people to edit and just kind of feel more comfortable with releasing. It was my first book, it's still my baby, but I want to take some time in creating the next one. So that's definitely something I'd want to do. I also perform, so continuing to do that. I don't see it necessarily being something different, possibly doing like duets, maybe working with others, collaborating. I really enjoy poetry with music. So maybe if I find someone that does music and then I do poetry, I haven't done that before, but I definitely would be interested in that. Um, Professionally, I mentioned this before, but I definitely want to do things kind of more community based. While I love what I do, and I want to keep doing that, I do find that there's some kind of power, I think, in just gathering people together. I noticed that in my women empowerment workshops, and I stress that in the beginning. I say, I love doing individual therapy, and I think, for some people it is necessary and they really benefit from it. But then there is another factor of just kind of, in this particular case, women coming together and being able to relate to one another, support one another, empower one another. But I did find that when I was doing the presentations, I was getting a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback, and people were able to share. It's both educational as well as interactional. So, I allow people to interact, and I find that that kind of makes it richer. But at the same time, I obviously do my own research, and I think there's power in being able to educate others.
Very awesome. And I think the group setting is always important because the same way how someone, if you're in a group, will just run and you're like, all right, let's run with them.
Yeah,
It's kind of that same feeling when you're in a group because when you're on your own, especially with a therapist, you feel like you're the only one with that problem
yeah,
or something like that, right? Or
right,
it's unique to you. And then you get into a group and you're like, holy shit, like we all got something in common. And,
right,
that's like a big thing because I think as human beings, we are like pack animals, right?
right.
We want to be able to all of us be all right. And I think that's also part of that healing. Before I let you go, if you wouldn't just tell us one more time where we can find you, where we can find your books,
Yeah,
your empowerment groups, and even how to book a session. And then after you give us that, if you wouldn't mind, just give us like a 30, 40, 60-second send off, something motivational that you can give to the audience. That way they can feel like, hey, I can get up and go do things for myself.
yeah,
Please.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, so again, I'm Michel Antoine, bilingual licensed mental health counselor, dancer, Zumba instructor, poet, and author. I know I didn't get too much into the dancing, but I'll just share now that I'm doing Zumba classes as well. So that's another form of my own self care as well. Um, I'm sorry, can you
Sure,
share
sure.
what
So
you said?
just tell us where we can give us your handles on social
Okay.
media, where we can find your book, and then how we can book a an appointment with you, please.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So again, my IG is Shelly Jelly 89, CHELIJELLY 89. My professional page is Michel Therapy, Michel Therapy. Um, to book a session with me, you can go to my website, www.micheltherapy.com. So I have my email there as well as my phone number. So I'm responsive to emails, responsive to phone calls, even responsive to texts if, that's your more comfortable form of, communicating. So you can do that there. And regarding my books, again, so Stop, Love, and Listen, you can find on Amazon. You can just type Stop, Love, and Listen just like that, or you can type in Michel M. Antoine. You'll see on Amazon that it'll say, "Did you mean Michael?" Because my name is very similarly spelled to that, but you can just say, "No, you meant Michel M. Antoine." And then regarding these two, I believe that Beautiful Minds Unite, I believe that they sell it via IG. So you can also, I believe that their IG is Beautiful Minds Unite. So it's, just like this. And then Dear Sister Friend, you can find more information about this book at She Will Speak series. So I would say, I guess, just as a send off, there's so many things I could say, but whoever is watching that, just kind of thinking about all of these things I've done and the goals that I've had, one thing I would recommend is to write down your goals just so that it's not something that's, in your mind. Now it's becoming something concrete, something that you can actually see and then envision and start thinking about the steps. I've had regarding my book, I remember during that time I was kind of relying on one person to edit and do a lot of things. So I was putting 100% energy into that one person, who unfortunately didn't help. But at the same time, I learned a lesson in the sense of, if you have a particular goal, if you feel like you're not getting the answer that you need, go to someone else or do something different and recognize it's your goal, it's unique to you, right? It's no one else's. So just keep pushing forward in that. But you can change up, your scenery, you can change up who you're speaking to if you feel like whatever it is that you're looking to get out of this is not being met.
Awesome. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that, because I think another lesson that teaches people is to do it on your own. You know, it's your
Yeah.
dream, you do it. You know what I mean? Like, you learn how to do it, you
Definitely.
learn how to get to it, because you got to put in. A lot of people don't realize you got to put in a lot of work to do everything that you've done or everything that I've done so far, and we're just getting started. It's been so much work.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, and I appreciate that so much. I'm gonna put all that information below, the books, your social media, and how to find you, okay? And I really appreciate you being on the channel. You've given us a great insight, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. To my audience, please go support. Also, visit me at therootwave.com for more interviews. Really appreciate you supporting me and supporting Michelle. Thank you so much. I guess we'll speak again, because we're always working on something together. So, yes.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you. And to my audience, I'll catch you around.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.